Hello and welcome everyone to a brand new series that I like to call Tarvel's Perspective. The whole point of Tarvel's Perspective is to give my opinion on a game or series that I want to talk about. It's a new format, so bear with me, okay? And for the first episode, I want to talk about a series that I absolutely love, Metroid. Now, some of you may know this already, but recently on Twitch I played through the entire Metroid series, every single game. And throughout the series I kept thinking, I need to talk about this. So, not only am I going to give my quick thoughts on each game in the series, we're going to slap them into a tier list, because that's always fun, right? I know y'all like tier lists. I know I do too. Now, the one thing I'm not going to get into in this series, because there are thousands of YouTube videos doing this, is get into the development history and the entire process of creating the game. While that is interesting, I'm not interested in talking about it. In this series, I'm just going to look at a game for what it is and not why it is. Does that make sense? Good. So let's start with Metroid. The original on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Oh baby. So before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about my personal history with this game. I never owned it myself, but my cousin did, who lived a few hours away. And anytime we would visit, me and my brother would immediately run upstairs to play Final Fantasy, Super Mario Bros. 3, and of course, Metroid. As much as I enjoyed seeing my family, I loved seeing what cool new games were out, since my cousin was much older than me and usually got his hands on them first. And playing Metroid for the first time as a kid, I actually hated it. Yeah, I just hated it, because it was so damn hard. It is one of the hardest, if not the hardest, Metroid game in the entire series. And honestly, I can mostly chalk this up to its age. It's one of the first of its kind. A giant, explorable map that is wide open to the player, which allows them to go wherever they want to, or more accurately, where they can. The story of this game is that the Galaxy Federal Police, aka the Galactic Federation, tasks Samus with infiltrating the planet Zebus and defeating Mother Brain, since she's leading the space pirates in an effort to use life forms known as Metroids as biological weapons. Not much as far as story goes, but it sets the scene. So, let's talk about the gameplay. It feels really great to be able to explore around Planet Zebus and go wherever you want to. Most NES games at the time were still segmented by linear level structure. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3, etc. The entire essence of the game, and really the series as a whole, is to explore, find upgrades, and use those upgrades to explore more and find more upgrades. Fight some bosses along the way, rock out to some killer tunes, solve some puzzles, uncover some lore if you're looking for it, and save the galaxy. The formula works. Now, as far as the music in this game, it's got some of the absolute bangers that you're used to. Brinstar, Brinstar Depths, the title screen, the escape sequence, they are all here, and they all add so much to the atmosphere of the game. Sound effects are decent too. I love all those and who can forget and of course. Now that last one you're going to be hearing a lot, because as I said earlier, this game will whoop your ass raw. Enemies do a shit ton of damage and have a ton of health themselves, and they do one of the most frustratingly annoying things in this first entry, and that's attack you while you're traveling through a doorway. It sucks! Not only that, but you can get stuck in the goddamn acid forever. Watch as I try to get this cookie jar on just barely too high of a shelf ass E-tank here in Kraid's room. It was awful. There can also be some NES jank when it comes to blocks that disappear and reappear. For instance, I got stuck climbing out of Kraid's lair while trying to climb this massive vertical shaft made of them. Also, because the environments are so similar in both aesthetic and structure, it's incredibly easy to get lost or travel endlessly through the same areas. If you're going to try and play this game, just use a map. No judgment from me. It makes the game so much more digestible and fun. One final flaw I'll touch on too, which is one of the worst, is that when you die, the game only respawns you with a pitiful 30 energy. This is barely enough to survive a couple hits from enemies, so if you want to heal yourself, get ready to farm enemies for huge chunks of time. As for the bosses, yeah, they're just kind of there. Kraid is mildly difficult, Ridley is a joke, but Mother Brain and the escape sequence are pretty fun. Aside from that, there's really not much to write home about in the boss department. Now, despite all this, I still really had fun with the game. A little bit about my personal taste when it comes to gaming is that I really love a challenge. If a game is too easy, my brain doesn't feel as engaged with what I'm doing as much as I would with a tougher experience, and I tend to just get bored. The Metroid series offers challenge in various ways: puzzles and exploration, map navigation, and of course, combat. The first entry really doesn't have much in the name of puzzles though, so it's mostly relying on the other two for its challenge. Does the challenge come from NES jank? Yeah, maybe, but it's what I grew up with, so I really don't mind. Overall, for the very first game, it's not bad. It really set the tone for what Metroid games are going to be moving forward. And on the first go, I kinda liked it. Though again, if you're gonna play this, use a map. Let's slap this puppy in the C tier for now. Alright, up next is Metroid 2, Return of Samus. Now this is where things really start to get interesting. This game's story and lore are incredibly important, and the events that take place here will be referenced to and pulled from continuously throughout the rest of the Metroid series. After losing contact with the initial research team and the rescue team sent to aid those researchers, the Galactic Federation sent out a group of special soldiers to take care of the Metroid threat on their home planet of SR-388, in order to prevent them from being weaponized again. I can imagine you know how this goes.
I don't like your plan. It sucks. Your plan is awful.
So of course, Samus is sent yet again by the Galactic Federation to the Metroid's home planet of SR-388, with one simple goal: kill every single Metroid on the planet before the space pirates can get their hands on any of them and end their threat once and for all. The game starts off with Samus landing her new ship on the surface, and from there you make your way down into the inner cave system to hunt every goddamn Metroid while they're probably just eating, sleeping, evolving, or having a casual shit. With each group of Metroids you kill, you find that previously inaccessible areas covered in
warm liquid goo
will lower, allowing you to advance further into the depths of the planet. This of course opens up more areas with new stuff to collect, and even more dangerous forms of Metroid to murder. This was presumably built by the Chozo as a defense mechanism once the Metroids grew too powerful, and only once an entire area is cleansed will a new area open. What's the gameplay like? Well, as with Metroid 1, I very much recommend you use a map for this game since there's none available in the game itself, especially given that it's on the Game Boy and everything looks monochromatic. It's not nearly as bad as the original where each area used the same tile sets and layouts as well, but it can still get pretty confusing after a while, especially with how small the screen size is. Aside from that, the general gameplay is very similar. Explore new areas, gain upgrades, move to new areas. Only this time you gotta make sure you've left no Metroid still breathing before moving on. The enemies themselves really aren't anything super interesting. The most memorable thing about the combat is definitely the Metroids themselves. You fight through multiple stages of Metroid evolutions, including Alpha, Gamma, Zeta, and Omega Metroids. Killing them is pretty much the same every time though. Just pump them full of as many missiles as you can and move on. The environments and rooms you fight them in vary up a little, but overall this doesn't do much to spice things up. The real difficulty of this game comes from the exploration and actually tracking the Metroids down and tracking down Samus's typical slew of upgrades. Missile expansions feel more important here than in the first game, since some of the later Omega Metroids can soak up a ton of missiles, and you don't want to be caught running out of ammo while you're fighting them. I found that in some areas things tend to be split up between area to get upgrades and Metroid nests, and I'm still not sure how I feel about it. On the one hand, it's nice to know that after I grab all the upgrades in one area, I'm for sure prepared to take on the Metroids and move on, but I think I would have liked a more balanced mix-up going through the planet. The upgrades themselves are pretty standard. Every upgrade from Metroid 1 returns, and a few more are added. The Spazer and Plasma Beam make their debut, however, much like the original, the beams don't stack, so you're forced to choose your favorite. Myself, I prefer the raw power of the Plasma Beam. There's even an area low down in the planet where you can freely swap to any beam you want, so you're never stuck backtracking to get the beam that you want or need. The Spring Ball and Space Jump also make their debut, and thank God they do so early, because this game also has the misfortune of introducing one of my most disliked upgrades in the series, the Spider Ball. In its first showing here, I really don't mind it that much as I do in future games, but more on that later. What I do dislike about it, however, is that there are sometimes upgrades hidden in incredibly high areas where only the Spider Ball is able to get at, and because of this, it means that any wall that can be Spider Balled on, aka any wall without a spike trap, could potentially have upgrades on them. So if you're trying to look for every upgrade without a map, you'll just be spending so much time bombing all of these high scaling walls. I really dislike when games do things like this. They'll have one or two items hidden in a very obtuse place, and because of that, your brain is now trained to look in every possible place that's like it. And if there's not that much to find, this can unintentionally kill the pacing of the game for a player who doesn't know any better, since they'll be spending God knows how long bombing every unmarked wall. I see you, Zelda 1. I'll admit, this is probably just a me problem, but I don't doubt that there's other people out there who get caught in this trap as well. The music in this game is basically non-existent. There's one great track that you're hearing now in the main vein of SR-388, but aside from that, there's really not much going on. It's going for some weird ambient noises that you might hear in a cave, but it can be kind of awkward and sometimes damn near annoying. I can't even friggin' tell if the music is actually music or just some loud ass enemy nearby about to kill me. It's not very good at all. And that's not just because it's on the Game Boy either. Have you heard Pokemon or Link's Awakening soundtrack? Fire. Just listen to this. What is this? The final boss of the game, the Metroid Queen, is a pretty fun fight. On my most recent playthrough, I did not do it correctly, and sadly, once I died, I ended up losing my entire save file due to an old Game Boy cartridge battery not holding the save. You lead into this fight by going through a highly technological area filled with a bunch of Metroid larvae, and no other enemies in sight. No lie, it's kind of fucking terrifying, especially as you get to the last corridor and the scary non-music music is blaring there, and BAM, there she is! The fight itself is good, dodging her attacks and firing missiles like crazy, and you can even stop her if you time your shots right and crawl down her fucking neck in morph ball form and bomb her insides. That's so metal. Once she goes down, you meet the series' second most important character, the baby. A tiny Metroid hatchling emerges from an egg, and instead of immediately wasting it like she did every single other Metroid, Samus sees it as harmless and can see that it's treating her like she's its mother. After that, you and the baby climb your way out of the lab and SR-388, and I absolutely adore this part. There's no challenge, there's no enemies, there are only these impassable crystals which the baby removes for you. It's pure atmosphere. The queen is dead, the deed is done, almost, and all that's left to do is just board your ship and call it a day. It's just a really damn cool sequence. And for the Game Boy, this one ain't bad. Is it that fun to play nowadays? Probably not. You're probably better off playing one of the 2 remakes of this. But I still had decent fun with it, and I do think it is better than the original. So let's slap this into the B tier for now. Okay, you all know what's next. Super Metroid. Oh baby. Oh baby! Yeah, like, come on, like, look, see, wow, just, damn. What the hell can I say about this game that hasn't been said already? This game is fucking fantastic. It's one of the best Metroid games and one of the best video games ever. I swear, every single time I play this game, I find something new. On my most recent playthrough on Twitch, chat had pointed out a couple things I'd never known before. You can make Ridley actually drop the baby if you pelt him enough in Sarah's station. And after you get the morph ball and climb back up through the elevator, the goddamn statues turn around to stare at you, cause Mother Brain is now tracking you. That's freaking crazy. The game just oozes atmosphere for many reasons, but none bigger than the soundtrack. By far the best OST in the series. Oh my god! Upper Brinstar. Lower Brinstar. Criteria. Lower Norfolk. Ridley's theme. Come on now. Even some of the more chill rooms like the item room, they all add an incredible amount to how this game feels. And who can forget the game loading theme? Does anyone else kind of think this sounds like Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears? It's so good, dude. The story here takes place after Metroid 2, with Samus escorting the baby Metroid to Ceres research station so that science can get its grubby little hands all over her new son. What a shitty mom Samus is. She doesn't even check the security at this new daycare when moments after she leaves, she gets a distress signal saying that the place was getting all fucked up. You get there and there's no music. The lights are all out and you find dead bodies of scientists all over the place. You also see a shattered tube that you literally just saw was your baby's crib. You find your daughter sitting on the floor when suddenly Ridley appears and takes off, gender-neutral baby in hand. And where else does he go but right back to the setting of Metroid 1, but planet Zebes itself. If that didn't set the tone and atmosphere of the game enough, the fact that you're returning to the same setting from the original game years later absolutely does. I feel bad for anyone who played this first without playing the original, because oh my god, this was jaw-dropping. To fall down into the old Torian and see it blown to shit, and to see Mother Brain's shattered capsule was so terrifyingly awesome, it's hard to put into words. Another thing I love in games is revisiting old areas under new conditions, be it positive or negative. Shoutouts to Metal Gear Solid 4 for absolutely nailing this. Trudging through familiar areas not knowing what to expect anymore is one of my favorite things about this game. The jump from NES to SNES and the fact that the map itself is a competent layout rather than the same rooms over and over again is obviously a huge plus. Alright, the graphics and music are drastically improved, and so is the gameplay. Well, I mean, it's one of the greatest games of all time for a reason. It feels so good. So good. Super Metroid is one of the few titles in the Metroid series that actually has a momentum-based physics system, and it feels damn good to play in. It's also the only game with an actual dash button, even without the speed boost upgrade. Your momentum carries through in your jumps, and it feels incredibly fun to play, and even better to master. It's most likely why speedrunners love this game so damn much. Some people don't enjoy the floatier feel to it, but I personally dig it. Super Metroid also introduces a lot of series staple upgrades. As mentioned before, the speed booster, which is one of my favorites to play around with. It also gives us the charge beam, gravity suit, super missiles, power bombs, grapple beam, and even the X-ray visor, which I'm actually not the biggest fan of, but more on that later. The speed boost and grapple beam are especially fun to use because of what I mentioned earlier, the momentum. These upgrades use it to its full potential, and once you master how they work, you can pull off some sick shit. Also, for the first time ever, you can turn Samus's power-ups on and off at will, and come up with some really interesting loadout combinations. Something not a lot of people know about is that each fully charged beam can execute a powerful attack if you've got power bombs equipped. You can even flick beams on and off during them to affect the properties of the attack. Not to mention the crystal flash, which makes Samus go full-on fetal for a full heal. This is just cool extra stuff you'd never know about if you're just trying to beat the game. None of it's needed or necessary, but it adds a lot of charm regardless. This game also lends itself to a lot of sequence breaking, and I love sequence breaking. I love it when a game rewards me for my technical skill rather than how much time I've spent playing it or what I have. I find with a lot of open world games and RPGs, you're mostly rewarded with how much time you've put in rather than your actual skill, which I guess can also be good. But I'd much rather play games that give me the option of being rewarded for time investment or mastery of the gameplay itself. And Super Metroid is one of the best examples of this. You can skip a ton of crap. You can fight the bosses in whatever order you want to, which, by the way, have some really great fights associated with them. Let me rephrase that. The main bosses have some really great fights. Some of the mini bosses aren't really too memorable. Spore Spawn is pretty lame. That red eel dude who plays whack-a-mole with you is whatever, I don't even know his name, who cares? Alright, here's an example of what I mean, which you may have seen before. When fighting against Dragon, you can either use the pile of missiles and super missiles you've gotten to that point to pump his gut full of explosives until it turns blood red. But if you're paying attention to your surroundings, you'll see these little turrets shooting at you, which can be damaged. Blow one of the caps off and you'll find an electric current that looks really similar to your grapple beam. And if Dragon gets his grubby little tentacles on you and starts dragging you up into the room, you can kill him in one shot by connecting your grapple beam to the wall and fry him to a crisp. That's so fucking cool! And I absolutely love stuff like that. When I was a kid, I would rent this game from our local gas station, and there was always a save file right at the end of the game, which makes me think of one tiny flaw this game actually has. If you save in the final room in Torian, you actually can't go back to the main portion of Zebes. You're just stuck there. Anyways, I would boot up the file as a kid, go fight Mother Brain, freak the fuck out, and turn the console off because I was so scared, cry about it, and I loved it. Now, this game is sadly not perfect, okay? There's some definite pacing issues that bug me even on replays. The wrecked ship is pretty meh. The boss, Fantoon, is great, but the rest of it is just kind of fine? That and Meridia. I just really don't enjoy going back through these areas very much. I can't even really pinpoint why. I guess it just feels unnecessarily large and there's not a whole lot of interesting stuff going on. You do run into the Machtroids, which is kind of interesting for a few seconds. But for each interesting part like that, you get something needlessly annoying, like watching the digger robot dig. Yeah, dig that dirt, digger robot. Do it. Do it faster. Why do you dig by doing flips? Can you just go a little faster, please? The way this game and the story ends, though, is just perfection. You finally made it to the new Torian after defeating all 4 of the main bosses, and as you head to Mother Brain's new base of operations, you fight your way through some Metroid larvae, as is tradition at this point. Then you run into a slew of enemies that have had their life sucked from them, and they just fade into dust if you touch them. Even giant Terizos, which you fought before and gave you problems. Nothing but dust. Then eventually you run into this indestructible enemy, and BAM! Out of nowhere, the Super Metroid shows up and sucks the life from it right in front of you, immediately showing you what happened down here before you arrived. This is the kind of storytelling Tarvold likes. Right after it's done, it starts attacking Samus and drops her to her knees until she's on the brink of death. And then it just flies away, and it makes the cry of the baby. Again, letting you know immediately, oh shit, that's my baby is jacked. Finally, you reach Mother Brain and pump her full of missiles until she turns into a giant freak bitch. And just like before, she starts kicking your ass, eventually pinning you to the wall with an insanely powerful hyper beam. And just before you die, the Super Baby Metroid comes in and starts sucking the life from Mother Brain. The sound effects and the music that plays as you lay there helpless and watch your child rip apart Mother Brain is just, it's so fucking cool, man. Once you both believe Mother Brain to be dead, the Metroid starts to heal Samus. But of course, she gets up and kills the baby once and for all. You hear its cry one last time as it explodes over top of Samus. And then you get the hyper beam that was just used against you, and you proceed to absolutely shred her ass. Nothing has ever felt so good. She is worthless, her head recoiling as she screams in pain while you avenge your fallen child. And to cap it all off, once she goes down, the escape sequence begins. Still using the hyper beam, you rip through space pirates and walls as the escape music blares and Torian shattering all around you, and you finally escape in your ship, and god damn it, this game is amazing. God, this game is so good. And I don't think anyone would blame me for slapping this right at the top in the S tier. Alright, next up is one of the very first controversial Metroids, and it released on the Game Boy Advance, Metroid Fusion. Now, right off the bat, I just want to say that I do really like this game. The story takes place after Super Metroid and starts out with Samus getting infected with something called an X-Parasite while escorting a research team to SR-388 well after she destroyed all the Metroids. This wreaks havoc on her body and suit, and she's ejected from her ship and picked up by the Federation in space. They rip the infected parts of her suit away, but her body's still infected. To save her, they inject some of the baby Metroid's leftover DNA into Samus's blood. This saves Samus, because the only reason she was infected with an X-Parasite in the first place is because they used to be the main prey of the Metroids on SR-388, and now that they're gone, they are free to populate once again. The DNA in Samus' system now actively suppresses and absorbs the X-Parasite, but the catch is that now Samus is part Metroid herself. And really, that's rad. The rest of the creatures and samples they retrieved get sent to the BSL station along with Samus's blown out duds, as well as Samus herself to investigate a strange explosion. And then the gameplay happens, and you play as Samus in her new fusion suit, which comes with all the benefits and weaknesses that being a Metroid carries. You can now absorb X-Parasites, which refill your health and missiles, but you're extremely weak to the cold and ice-based weapons. The new suit has a brand new, sleeker, more alien look to it, and I kind of love it. I don't love it more than her standard Various suit, but I do love that it's different and slimmer. It feels that way in the gameplay too. You can now pull yourself up on ledges and even transition into Morph Ball seamlessly while doing so if there's a hole big enough to squeeze through. You can also climb certain walls and ceilings since you're much lighter now, but the animation for the ceiling one is kind of whack. but you take quite a bit more damage than you did before. Fusion is much more focused on the combat rather than the exploration. And this is where some of the controversy of this game comes into play. Not only is this game incredibly linear, but it's the sheer amount of yappity, yada yap, it's really annoying. The game really leans hard on the dialogue between Samus and her ship's new computer, which she had to take from the Federation. It reminds her of her old CO, Adam Malkovich, and he's kind of an asshole. He bosses Samus around and tells her exactly what to do. And as the player, you have to do what he tells you to do. Every time you enter a new area, you need a new debriefing. You get an excuse, an objective, and a marker on your map for where you're supposed to go. And the door behind you is locked, so you're stuck taking orders from this butthole of an AI. And not only that, at a certain point in the game, you, the player, actually see it talking to a silhouette of a Federation member being all, "Does Samus suspect anything?" And the computer's like, "Nah, dog." So you, the player, know you're being lied to, and yet you still need to follow the AI's directions on rails the whole way through. I don't know if it was necessary to show that to the player. It just makes it even worse. I don't know, whatever. Like I said earlier, this game is incredibly linear, which is a big shift in the structure of Metroid as of yet, and is definitely why most people have issues with it. The game doesn't focus on exploration, and it's much more focused on fast-paced combat and boss fights. The X-Parasite is the main enemy of the game, and their ability is that they can absorb and mimic other creatures and become a new powered-up state of that creature. This includes all of the creatures on board, as well as you. They've taken what DNA they got from you and combined it with your old suit parts, and now you've got something called the SAX, which is a fully powered X-Parasite version of Samus roaming around the station. The key here is that this thing has the Ice Beam, and being that you're part Metroid, now you're extremely weak to it. I didn't mention it before, but the only way to kill Metroid larvae in the previous games was to first freeze them with the Ice Beam and then pump them full of missiles, since Metroid DNA is extremely susceptible to the cold. This whole game kind of plays out like a space horror movie. You're all alone trapped in this floating lab, and slowly but surely the X-Parasites start infecting more creatures. They get bigger and stronger as you move along and unlock new areas. Not to mention the SAX can show up at any time and whoop your ass immediately if it senses you nearby. It creates a ton of tension when it shows up, and you really do feel anxious when it's on screen. If you play it cool, you can usually stealth by it without engaging. But if you're ever caught, this terrifying music starts to play, and it will relentlessly hunt your ass down until you are dead, and then you start freaking out. Usually when running into it, you're in an area where you can run through some obstacles or find a hiding spot. But if you ever stumble over any of those obstacles, you will be punished because the SAX will start ice beaming you to death. Despite the unnecessary amount of dialogue, the story itself is actually pretty sweet. I love the vibe of the BSL station. I love the X-Parasite as a concept and as an enemy, and I love that they keep adapting, evolving, and gaining strength the deeper in the game you get. The game has an incredibly eerie, scary vibe to it, like you're being hunted. You're made to feel like how Samus's enemies feel when they see her. It's such a fun way to flip things on its head, and I love how being part Metroid ties directly into the gameplay. When the narrative and the gameplay meld seamlessly together like that, I just adore that kind of storytelling. The Metroid series does this really well. It also does it terribly, but we'll get to that. The music is fine. It kicks in when it needs to add some fear or tension, but really there's no tracks in this game I go back to listening to. The GBA sound chip kind of sounds like ass for the most part, though some games can make it work. There's really no earworms here, which is kind of a big bummer because I love the music of Metroid. The gameplay kind of feels like a much stiffer Super Metroid. Momentum is gone, jumps almost always feel the same, and wall jumping has been nerfed to all hell. You cannot climb a single wall anymore. You're ejected off the opposite side of the wall when you jump from it. Bomb jumping is also incredibly difficult. This game really does not want you sequence breaking it much, and it really shows in those two techniques especially. The level layout itself really restricts what you can do, and a lot of the time you're in an area just trying to get to the waypoint, but the way to get there isn't always what you'd expect. Sometimes this feels really cool, like you tricked the game and your asshole computer, but other times it really doesn't, and it feels stupid. For example, there's a door with a button that's behind it, typically shot at with a wave beam. But nope, you're supposed to walk over top of it and fall behind it through some blocks. Okay, and that's just one example. This game loves to try and hide its progression paths to try and trick the player into thinking they're going against the AI. A really cool thing that this game does is tailor certain bosses to Samus's old power-ups, since her old suit chunks were infected. Once you beat them, you can absorb the X-Parasite and gain those abilities back. The bosses themselves even reflect the power itself. It's pretty cool. Yet again, this ties the gameplay into the lore and the story. I love that! The controls too are better than ever. You can now just hold R to equip missiles and let go to go back to your beam. Feels much better than the clunky weapon select button from Super Metroid. L is used for aiming diagonally. You just hold it down and tap up or down to change the angle. The only new power-ups here are the ice missile and the diffusion missiles, both of which are again tied to the story. Since Samus' suit would reject the ice beam as it is now, kind of, she instead gets ice missiles to freeze things. Diffusion missiles just cause a big AoE of snowflakey goodness because of how unique it is. Yeah, it's not that great. There's also the wide beam, but we all know that's just the spacer. Near the end of the game, the story really cranks up to 11. You end up in a restricted area, only to find Metroid babies being bred and mutated, and eventually run into the SAX trying to, well... It makes sense. The SAX is an X-Parasite after all, and to see its main predator being bred and mutated, it's probably not cool with that. You peel right out of there and shoot that entire lab chunk off into space. Though at this point there are now at least 10 SAX running around the station. Yeah, great. This is now the second time the Federation has tried to science Metroids for their own good, only to have it backfire in exuberant fashion. Shit has spectacularly hit the fan at this point, and it's gotten to the point where things are totally foobar. So at this point, it's best you just blow this place up and get the hell out of here. Except you can't! This dickhead computer locks you in the room and tells you that the Federation now want to use the X for their own purposes. Yeah, no, that's not gonna fly. So what does Samus do? Use a power bomb or super missile to blow a hole through the door like the SAX did? Nah, man, instead she just calls it Adam. And the computer is all like, damn, you Rumpelstiltskin me, yo, and reveals it actually is Adam in binary form. He's so moved by this that he lets her out and allows her to send the BSL station towards the nearby SR-388 to destroy both it and the planet in one fell swoop to end the X-Parasite completely. The final run is pretty fun and finally has you go toe-to-toe with one of the SAX. It's got kind of a predictable pattern though, and you can pretty easily cheese it, but then it goes into its mega form and becomes a mutated version of the Hopper enemy that was in the intro video. You know, the one that actually infected Samus? Really nice touch, but it goes down very fast, unfortunately. And then it's time for the escape. You race all the way back to your new ship only to see this just beforehand. And anyone who's played Metroid 2 before will know what that means. And Omega Metroid blocks your path, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. He smacks your ass to the back of the screen when suddenly the SAX you beat earlier shows up, takes form, and starts blasting it with the ice beam. Though the SAX does go down quickly too, but allows you to absorb it to gain the final upgrade, the ice beam. Wait, what? Wait, how is that possible? This whole time we've been told our suit can't use the ice beam because we're part Metroid. We also turn orange and kind of look like we're wearing the Various suit, but in the scene after this you can clearly see it's still the Fusion suit. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really understand how this works at all. Maybe you absorbed the essence of your old suit? Whatever. Anyway, you ice beam the Omega Metroid down and escape thanks to your old friends from Super Metroid that I totally saved before. Apparently they were on the BSL station and knew how to control your ship. Yeah, this ending makes no fucking sense. Let's just roll with it. The game ends with SR-388 being completely destroyed along with the BSL station and the X with it, supposedly. And as of right now, this is the latest entry in the canon story, so we still have no idea what happens next. Until... Yeah! E3 happened! Metroid Dread! Oh my god! But yeah, back on topic. There's a lot of aspects of this game I like. I wish it had a hard mode where you could skip the dialogue. If there was a skip dialogue option, this game would be so much more replayable than it is. But as it is, you have to listen to everything every time. Kinda blows. So Metroid Fusion. Some people don't like it. A lot of people still really do, and I'm one of them. I'm gonna put this in the A tier. Thank you guys so much for watching part 1 of this Metroid retrospective. Originally, I was planning to do the entire series all in one, but this turned out to be much more work than I once anticipated. So I'm gonna have this done in 3 parts. If you guys enjoyed it, please let me know, drop a like, share this to any other Metroid fans that you know, and if you wanna check out my full series playthrough, you can do so over at the Tarvold's Quest VODs YouTube channel. Thanks again everyone for watching. This is my first time doing something like this, and my god, do I hate the mouth sounds, words that come out of my mouth lips sometimes. So I will get better and I will improve if I do it more. Come find me on Twitch and all the socials. And a huge thanks goes out to my supporters on Patreon. So thanks again, and we'll see you on the next quest. Stay tuned for part 2. Bye!